Welcome, everybody. This is the May 17th, 2011 meeting of the Eugene City Budget Committee. I just want to deal with a couple of process items. One thing is that depending on how many folks we have for the public hearing, we might choose to just remain in this room and accommodate them here rather than adjourning and going into the council chambers. That's perfectly fine for us to do that. So we are being recorded to be televised later, but because the County Budget Committee meeting is going on right now, they are up on the Metro TV in real time and will be posted later. So either way, if we move over, we would have the camera recording over in the other room. But if we can accommodate folks who are coming for the public hearing in this room, I would prefer to just stay here unless you all really want to get up and move to another room. We would still work to take our break at 7:15 before the public hearing. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we had talked about pretty briefly about the idea of subcommittee, a citizen subcommittee. And I met with finance staff yesterday, and my proposal, and we can finish this conversation tomorrow, but my proposal is going to be, rather than trying to come up within this meeting or the next meeting with suggested topics that we then form a committee around, that we make a commitment to have the citizen members meet and come up with recommendations of one or two subcommittees that we might want to propose. And of course, we would wish to have council input on what those topics might be. So we'd have a dedicated meeting to talk about the idea of subcommittees, and then we would make a recommendation to council out of that meeting. So that's what we discussed, and I think makes sense in terms of our time frame and what we hope to accomplish. There's some other details in there in terms of the makeup of the citizen members and turnover that we'll need to look at, but I think in terms of a general way to move forward on that piece, it makes sense to me. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to finance staff and central services staff and the city manager to give us the next part of our agenda, which is the multi-year financial plan.
Budget Committee members, City Councilors, my name is Christy Hammond. I'm the Central Services Director, and really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you this evening to walk through our multi-year financial plan. It's a 6-year financial planning document that we've been producing for, I guess we've gone through 7 editions of this. Previous to this version and the one before that, we did produce this document every single year, and now we've gone to an every other year, and also align that with the timing of the CIP. So without further ado, the other thing I would like to mention is that as we go through this, we'll be talking about some of the specific projects that are outlined within the plan. We do have several experts here from the department and the service areas, so if you want to ask specific questions, we'll be able to address those as well. So all of you should have received a copy of the multi-year financial plan, and I have some extra copies in case you don't have it with you. I will be referring to it as I go through our presentation this evening. So what is the multi-year financial plan? Basically, it's a 6-year forecast that highlights our top, high-level unfunded needs that we have as an organization. The process begins with the departments identifying those unfunded capital or service operational needs that we have over the next 6 years. And those then are sent to the finance team, who compile and produce the multi-year financial planning document. One of the key things that the departments need to consider as they're looking for items to put into the document is that there's a $250,000 threshold, meaning that in either one of the fiscal years throughout the 6-year plan, or one of those, and you can have there's smaller amounts as well, needs to meet the threshold of $250,000. After the document is compiled and everything is put together, the executive management team then is presented by finance with all of the information for discussion, prioritization, review, and approval. In the FY 12 to 17 multi-year financial plan, it includes 51 unfunded items, which is quite a few. And overall, the next fiscal years, the total to fund all of those items would be $281 million just during that 6-year period. A couple of things that I want to point out as we start using the plan and referring to it as we go through the discussion tonight. Those of you that are familiar with the plan will notice that we condensed it a little bit and changed the format, and we focused our energy on 9 priority items that were identified and approved by the executive management team. And there's also a table in the back of the document that reflects the other 42 items that are part of the plan. We'll talk primarily about the 9 items that were identified as high priorities as we go through the process. Get some technical assistance here with that. Thank you very much. Okay, so one of the things that I think it's important to understand is what are the benefits of putting together the multi-year financial plan. It's a significant amount of work for the departments and the organization, but it is truly a valuable planning tool. The multi-year financial plan promotes and encourages long-term planning by providing a comprehensive, flexible planning document and is a tool that can be used to support the strategic thinking and planning for our organization. It identifies current and future funding gaps for a wide range of unfunded capital and non-capital related expenditures. One of the things that I really appreciate about the document is that it provides a link between the long-term financial planning of the organization and council goals, as well as fund forecasts, and so that we can kind of keep track of those and how things are going, and other planning processes. An example of that would be Envision Eugene. Another benefit is that it increases the understanding of the operational impacts of the capital and maintenance deferral decisions that we make. By looking across a 6-year period, you have a better sense of what some of the impacts of the decisions that are being made and what the long-term impact to our financial status is. Other thing I wanted to point out is that there's a very thorough list of the benefits of the multi-year financial plan on page 1 within your multi-year financial plan document. The other thing is that the multi-year financial plan shows the unfunded operational impact of capital decisions. So one of them that we'll be talking about in more detail later is the acquisition of parkland and the lack of operations and maintenance funding to actually operate those as need be and to maintain them. So having the document it captures organization-wide unfunded needs and helps us better understand our gaps as we build towards a long-term sustainable budget, which is the goal that we've been talking about together for the last few years. And the other thing that I want to do is to point out that there's a link between the multi-year financial plan and the CIP. And as I go through a lot of these items, you'll note it will be identified if the item or that we're talking about is in the CIP, but there is a link, and the timing of the multi-year financial process coincides with the capital improvement planning. So talk a little bit about how the multi-year financial plan is organized. It's basically categorized in five different ways: continuing current services, preserving and maintaining our assets, the existing assets that we have, achieving efficiencies or long-term savings, implementing adopted plans and policies, and improving or expanding services. And those would be improving expanded services or that are not part of a planning document. The other piece that you will see in the plan is that it reflects whether or not the unfunded costs are capital, facility-related, or program-related costs. And one thing that it's important to understand is that these reflect the net costs. So any potential revenue that is associated with that particular item or projected operational efficiencies that reduce costs are not part of, they're not factored into the dollar amount that you see within the plan. And all of the amounts, just so you know, are shown in $1,000 increments. So I've talked a little bit about identifying the high priority items. This is a new thing that we've moved forward with this iteration of the document, and we have identified 9 that the executive team has approved. The list that is recommended was based on several factors as we looked at the whole list of 51, and some of these are going to be very familiar to you. We've talked about them several times. They're not new issues, but they're obviously ongoing issues with long-term impact. The recommended list was based on considering the following factors: potential impact on core service delivery, level of commitment the city has already made to funding a particular item, preservation of city's investments in infrastructure and facilities, and the ability to sustainably fund the item over a long period of time. One of the other things I'd like to mention about these items is that for most of them, or many of them, they also reflect a significant amount of community feedback that we've maybe received about an interest in a particular area, whether it be public safety or what have you. And also that they include the expert evaluation of the service delivery needs going forward. So there's a lot of thought. I mean, these items reflect a lot of work, in some cases involving the community, but a lot of staff work in getting to this point and identifying these critical needs. These 9 items, as you can see, total about $134 million over the 6-year forecast period if we were just to focus on these 9. So it's a significant portion of the 51 that we talked about earlier. The recommendations are a good starting point, I believe, for discussion with the executive managers, budget committee, city council, and citizens, and other subsequent budget discussions that we may need to have in order to make decisions moving forward. So next I'll go into a little bit of detail about these. Oops. I did left click. Oh, there we go. So this one is clearly near and dear to our hearts. We've been talking about the general fund shortfall for the last, 3 years for sure, and have made it a high priority. So all of you received the multi-year financial forecast, and I believe you got that in late February or early March, which reflects what we anticipate to be the deficit moving forward. So the amount in the chart there below and also within your document shows the gaps that we're anticipating for the next 6 fiscal years. It assumes continuing service levels as they are in a snapshot in time today, and striving towards an 8% reserve for revenue shortfall. You've heard John Reese, our city manager, talk a lot about the importance of having our reserve for revenue shortfall at the 8% level so that we can weather the tough economic challenges that we face. And the 8% reserve for revenue shortfall also provides us with some flexibility as we have unforeseen things that we have to address. So the unfunded amounts, as we've also talked about, it's the gap between what we fund right now, what our current revenues are that are coming in, and the gap that we anticipate. So none of this is accounted for in terms of looking forward. So that's approximately $5 million per year. So one of the graphs that you're used to seeing quite often, and we refer to it as the jaws of life, and it really sort of kind of emphasizes the need for our 8% reserve target and why it is necessary to continue to work towards building that. Over the course of the 6-year period, the 8% reserve is roughly $10 million each fiscal year. And for fiscal year 12, we have a projected reserve of $8 million, or 6.3%. So we're inching our way towards 8% reserve target and need to be mindful about achieving that goal so that we're ready to move towards a sustainable budget. If we did nothing, which would never happen, by fiscal year 14 we would run through the entire amount of that reserve. obviously, as I said, we won't let that happen, but it is something to be cognizant about and why it's important that we continue to focus on building our sustainable budget. Okay, thank you. So the next one on the list of 9 is the ambulance transport fund shortfall. And the numbers that are used in the multi-year financial plan are based on the forecast that is put together for the ambulance transport fund. And it reflects the amount that's needed to balance the fund over the next 6 years. So last week, I believe it is, Chief Groves gave you a pretty thorough summary of what's happening with the ambulance transport fund, and so I'm sure you took the time to read that, but I will also kind of reiterate a couple of points. The ambulance transport fund is currently operating at a deficit, and primarily because the revenues are outpacing the cost of transporting patients. 65% of the transport are for Medicaid and Medicare patients, and the amount of revenue that's received for those transports is not covering the cost of the service. In addition, the fund also provides transport services for folks that are unable to pay. And a lot of times, most of those accounts are turned over to an external collection agency. Unfortunately, we only receive about 3% back from the collection of those accounts that are not deemed payable. I'd like to remind you just for a couple of minutes about what we've done to stabilize this fund over the short run over the past few years. In late fiscal year 2009, the ambulance transport fund rates were increased, which temporarily balanced the fund. In fiscal year 10, the fund's capital contribution of approximately $330,000 was waived so that we could balance the fund. And in fiscal year 11, which is the current fiscal year that we're in, the general fund provided a $450,000 one-time subsidy to contribute to ambulance replacement. If you think of the ambulances as the infrastructure, what is needed, the tool that's needed to provide the service, it's pretty critical that we continue to look at funding those over the long haul. The FY12 budget proposed is expected to, or includes a $300,000 subsidy, which will also allow for the fleet contribution and transfer. Future years of the shortfall projections include annual contributions for the medic replacement, so they do reflect the reinvestment in that asset. The next one is the parking fund stabilization. Again, it's based on review of the parking fund forecast. Our parking fund managers have determined that there are not enough resources to do all of the capital major maintenance work that needs to be done. That's reflected in the CIP for fiscal year 13 through fiscal year 15. In fact, there's a $3.4 million deficit that they need to address. The numbers that you see in the chart and within the document that you have also have included impact of the free downtown parking, higher security costs that they're facing, and the rate adjustments. Some of the projects that are in the CIP for the parking fund include sealing interior and exterior walls at the Holt Garage, Parkade, and Pearl Street Garage, repairing the cracks at the Overpark and Main Library Parking Garage, sealing of the decks at the Overpark, the Parkade, and the Pearl Street Garage, and elevator upgrades at the Overpark, Parkade, and Holt Garage. So the next one on the list is Parks and Open Space Operations and Maintenance Capacity. I touched on this a little bit earlier, and for those of you that have been watching, may have been tracking with some of the council meetings. I know our councilors were obviously there, but we've had a couple of presentations. One was in the fall and included Parks, Open Space, Recreation, and Facilities, and sort of talked about that service delivery as a whole. And recently, I believe there was some other conversation that came up at a council meeting that talked about the unfunding of operations and maintenance for park services. And basically what's happened is that the community has been very supportive, and the Eugene's Park and Natural Area System has benefited from a tremendous amount of that community outpouring for the need for parks and having those within our community. We've passed 2 voter-approved park bond measures, successful donation program, and also have had park system development charges. These dollars have really infused the parking fund and have allowed us to acquire a lot of land. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to keep pace with the acquisition of land, and we're straining our system that we have available for operations and maintenance. So although Eugene's park and natural area system has increased significantly over a decade, we're just not keeping pace. And so what you'll see is the $2 million that's identified in each of the fiscal years in the plan reflects the deferred maintenance that we're accumulating. Speaking of deferred maintenance, the next one is the general fund building inventory. This is the general fund inventory of deferred maintenance, and the numbers that are provided here reflect the data that's captured in the general fund building inventory, the facility condition report, and this is also included in the FY12 through 17 CIP. The city has over 2 million square feet of facilities, community centers, pools, our Holt Center, City Hall, a lot of general office space, fire stations. There's a wide range of facilities that we have as assets that we need to continue to maintain and take care of as they're valuable assets to providing our service. The current general fund inventory is approximately 113 buildings and structures, over 900,000 square feet, and the total replacement value is approximately $190 million. The unfunded costs that you see in the chart do not include City Hall. As you know, we're working on moving towards a resolution for this site and having ongoing discussions about how to address the deficits at this particular building. This estimate for the deficit also assumes that we will continue increasing our capital preservation resources by $100,000 per year through fiscal year 17. And also just a reminder, if marginal beginning working capital is high enough, an additional $900,000 is appropriated for deferred maintenance, but this is not assumed in the projected unfunded costs. So the $900,000 is not accounted for in what you're looking for here. So the next one is Echo Hall and Sheldon Pool Systems Preservation. The pools, as you know, are absolutely vital in the community, and there are very few of them that we have available, and keeping them functioning for our community is a high priority. The major repairs or replacement of water supply and piping and drain system has been identified as a funding gap, and that is based on the facility condition reports and the engineering analysis that has been done on the two pools. These items are also listed in the fiscal year 12 through 17 CIP. One of the things that I think is important to remember is that finding a solution to address this problem by fiscal year 14 is really critical so that we can continue to operate our pools. Anytime our pools are down, we're not able to provide the services and the revenue that offsets the cost of those facilities. Another one you've heard a lot about, these are nothing new here tonight, but pavement preservation program for funding of project backlog. So this is based on the information that's provided in the multi-year financial plan that is based on the 2010 pavement management report listed, and it's listed the city's backlog of needed pavement preservation projects at over $150 million. In 2007, the council subcommittee, I believe some of you were participating on that, on transportation funding solution recommended a yearly total pavement preservation funding target of $18 million. So what you see here in the chart is the gap between that $18 million and the funding that we have available for pavement preservation. The annual unfunded amounts are shown, but they also reflect that we received the local motor vehicle fuel tax revenue, transportation SDC reimbursement revenue, and of course the 2008 bond revenue. I'd like to call your attention just real briefly to fiscal year 14-15. You'll see that there's a large jump, and that reflects the expiration of the bond revenue in fiscal year 14. Envision Eugene technical work. So you've heard a lot about Envision Eugene over the course of the last year. The purpose of Envision Eugene is to develop a comprehensive set of growth strategies to meet the city's 20-year land needs. Many of these strategies will include a lot of technical analysis as we decide what needs to be done moving forward. So what we have identified is a $300,000 target over the course of the next few years to focus on the technical work. I strongly would suspect that as that technical work gets completed, what we'll see is this will change to implementing some of the Envision Eugene activities that need to happen as we move forward. And last but not least are the jail bed additions. Last year, we started applying more funding, allocation of resources into jail beds, but that was a one-time resource. And we've purchased 10 beds at the Springfield Jail for the housing of City of Eugene municipal offenders. And we've also proposed including one-time funding in fiscal year 12 for continuing those jail beds. The dollar amount in the multi-year financial plan reflects a $350,000 base and then the inflationary adjustment over the course of those years. And what we're finding is that the jail beds have been extremely effective in helping us address some of the issues that we're trying to manage locally and within the community. And they also support the Downtown Safety Initiative and other initiatives that relate to policing activity. So the 42 other unfunded costs identified in the multi-year financial plan, I'm just going to highlight a few, but I will call your attention again to your multi-year financial plan. As I talked about, one of the things that we did is we spent a lot of time changing the format. And that meant that rather than having a single page like this for every one of the items that are listed in the multi-year financial plan, we put the remaining 42 within a table format, just for ease of reference. And it doesn't mean that any of these are any less important than the 9 that are identified. It's just, more urgent and, it was just a sorting mechanism. So of the categories, we talked about the 5 categories that the multi-year financial plan is broken into. The 2 major categories that have unfunded items are the continuation of current services and the implementing of adopted plans and policies. A couple of examples under the continuing current services are the emergency medic unit additions, and that's a $13 million add, and equipment replacement of $9.9 million. Those are just a couple of things, and you'll find them within your document. One of the things I would say about equipment replacement, it is absolutely vital that we plan for the timely replacement of equipment. A lot of those have to do with replacement of fire equipment that's needed for life safety and delivery of life safety services. And we do our best within our budgets to set aside funds for replacement of equipment, but as budgets have continued to shrink over the last few years, it's become increasingly more challenging for the departments to be able to do that and to set aside those funds. On implementing adopted plans and policies, a couple highlights are the police staffing initiative, which includes adding additional patrol staffing, supervisory and admin staff, and then the other one that jumped out at me because of the large amount is the Willow Creek and Churchill Aquatic Community Center, and that's $21.9 million. So just to wrap up a little bit, one of the things that I want to point out is that I really appreciate the work of this group. I think that each year, as you're called together, you have a tough task of trying to address not only these unfunded needs, but all of the different things and the high priority items that come up through the budget process and through the year. And as you focus, one of the things that is, I think, a challenge and where I think the multi-year financial plan can be a valuable tool and resource for you is that when we sit down together as the budget committee to make decisions, we tend to focus on the next 12 months. And we focus in 12-month increments. And I think that using this planning tool as a resource gives you an idea about the impacts of some of the decisions that we're making on the short term that have a long-term impact. For instance, if we do something around capital, you need to be thinking about operations and maintenance and so forth. The multi-year financial plan is a valuable resource in moving us toward our sustainable service level. Again, it captures a wide range of our plans and policies, and I think that helps us in making good decisions as we look for defining what a sustainable budget will be moving forward. And I think that's another opportunity in terms of this resource that's available to you. As we have discussions and start thinking about what a sustainable budget will include, there are items in here that you would probably want to consider looking at. And then the other thing that I think is really valuable about the multi-year financial plan is that it also provides an opportunity to assess what happens when we use the one-time funds to fill the long-term gaps. So one of the items that we talked about tonight was the ambulance transport fund and the status of that fund. So over the last few years, I talked about we've been taking one-time money, we've been deferring purchase of ambulances and things like that as we've stabilized the fund, but we need to get to a sustainable solution for that fund and have some serious discussion and decisions that need to be made as we move forward. And I know that we will, but it's just an example of using one-time funds. The financial resources that are needed to address all of the unfunded needs in the multi-year financial plan is huge. As I mentioned, to fund everything over the course of that 6-year period is in the neighborhood of $281 million. So lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about, using this tool as the strategic decisions are made. It's an opportunity to consider, as you look at use this tool and the CIP and other information that's available to you in planning documents, as to consider what will be funded into the future, how we will fund it, and does the decision contribute to a sustainable budget. So as you're thinking about how to fund things long-term or where to fill gaps, how does it continue to our goal of building a long-term sustainable budget? And with that, I just want to thank you again for your time and all the hard work that you put in during the budget process. We greatly appreciate it. And I also want to thank the finance team and the departments for the work that goes into putting together this document. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have or try to.
Thank you so much. It was a great presentation. Folks have comments, questions, responses? John?
Great presentation, great document. It kind of shows, it's kind of an eye-opener as to where we are, where we're going, and what challenges lie ahead. One of the questions that I had regarding the deferred maintenance on the public buildings, so it says that the estimate assumes that the building capital preservation resources are increased by $100,000 per year. So does that mean it'll be $100,000 this year and then
another $100,000 the following year?
So at the end of it, it'll be $500,000 per year more than it is now. Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
That's great. And then I guess another thing that just came up in it was just a sidelight. So in the Envision Eugene costs, most of those were for staff and planning and stuff like that. Were any considerations given to legal costs in the Envision Eugene? Because, I mean, I know that was something that's been discussed, that this may end up in Glenn's lap for a little bit. Has that been part of the $300,000?
I don't know if that was considered. Let me defer to Sarah Maderi for that. Sure, Sarah.
So, John, what we did was we took a number that we thought was reasonable given the different pillars and strategies that were coming out, that was attainable number that would include doing the neighborhood area plans, getting some of the stuff implemented, and associated costs that would go with that. So it's not an exact science, but it's a number that we thought, yeah, we could probably start really getting things done with this number.
And I would, there would be a minimal legal cost because we would be handling that in-house. Emily would be doing most of the legal work, and so there wouldn't be any outside legal fees. The cost would be related to preparing records, those sorts of things.
Yeah. So
it would be a pretty small cost, out-of-pocket cost for the city.
And all I was thinking was, I mean, I remember when this whole plan was put forward, there was thoughts that, let's do this right so that if it does go to court and gets challenged, we've got our T's crossed in the right direction. And I just, anytime something goes to LUBA or that type of thing, it can be costly. So.
And this number was never really intended to capture that. That's
okay.
Part of the ongoing budget. This is, we've got the plan. We've clearly laid out the things we need to do to protect neighborhoods, encourage compact development, and these are the strategies to move us forward on those, not the adoption and legal part associated with that. That's already built in.
All right.
Anything else, John? Counselor Ortiz?
So I'm not really clear on, with the jail bed number that's in here. Can you, so is that 1 million or is that 1,800?
It's 1.85 million,
Okay.
but that's the total for the 6-year period.
Okay, for the 6-year period. All right.
50,000 a year.
All right. So that.
Yeah,
okay.
$350,000 plus some inflationary adjustments over the
So,
course.
and the one-time funding that was for the jail beds last year is also in the budget this year? And we're looking to increase that number, John?
One of the things that was a request from this group for last time was to the police chief on what would be helpful for downtown. One of those items is additional jail beds. Would be helpful for him as he moves forward with his downtown policing effort. And as Christy mentioned, it has made a difference for the policing in order to be able to do it. So, yeah, that was one of the things that I think has been talked about by the Budget Committee is increasing the jail beds, which is
In addition to the 10?
in addition to the 10.
Do you have a number? Does Pete have does Chief?
I don't know. I think it's Mike Clark's motion eventually to make, but depending on how all that goes, we would be able to assist in that. But
Okay.
additional jail beds is helpful for Pete.
I
on his-
understand,
in his
and I don't
view.
disagree. I just was trying to get a more broader conversation than when the motion gets on the table. And then my next question is on the ambulance transport fund. Is Chief Brooks here?
Karen Brack is here.
Oh, hi. Hi, Chief. So, I was just curious, we put money into an account last year to support the ambulance fund. Was all that money used?
We are actually, we came out at the end of the year with maybe a little bit of overage, but what we did was we kicked that forward to this year for ambulance replacement also. So anything that we had that was overage actually went into the upcoming budget. We are also doing a little bit better on the revenues, and so some of the projections projections get tweaked a little bit because of that, because the revenues have actually been a little bit better than expected.
They did not use all of those dollars.
Okay, so that's going to come forward, and then we're going to put more money into it for them to use to stabilize the fund for this year?
So the total amount that will be, that all netted out is the $638,000 will be the amount that gets budgeted into the ambulance transport
Out of the
fund
general?
from general fund. And the additional dollars that were not spent this year gets rolled over, and that's considered part of that $630,000.
Oh, okay, so, okay.
It's not 638 plus the rollover,
Okay,
right?
that's-
It's just 638 is the.
So that's going to be the base, okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that there was some money left over. I know you guys do due diligence on funding issues, and so I was glad to hear that. And thank you for the memos and stuff around the response times. You know, this is interesting because 10, 15 years ago when I was paying really close attention to this, when we were, in starting the trauma system and all, the goal was something like 3 minutes.
Still is, I think.
Well, I don't know if that's the goal, but that's not what the numbers reflect. So, more people in the community, that's for sure. Thank you.
Councilor Clark?
Thank you very much. Is it, in this discussion, we only have a half hour for motions a little bit later. Is that appropriate for us to go into discussion of some of the motions at this time?
If it relates to our presentation, I think it's appropriate.
I had 357 as the FY13 for 10 more beds, and that applies if it's 10 additional beds beyond that.
If you're asking, would that purchase an additional 10 beds beyond what is already in the budget?
I know that FY13 is for 10, but if we were to ask for 20, would it be an additional 357? Would that do the job?
Well, the one thing that that you probably saw on the slide is that the $350,000 is not solely just for jail bids, but also for the system to support getting people to the jail. So I believe $50,000 of the $350 that is in the budget is for judges, court-appointed attorneys, city prosecution, and court staff time.
So 300,000 would buy an additional 10 beds, approximately 300,000.
Well, here's, I guess, to let everybody know that the Police Commission last year had a presentation from Judge Allen. One of the things that he said was that he makes decisions every single day about whether or not how he's going to deal with people that he doesn't have space to put into jail that he would like to. He made a very specific comment about the fact that he could easily use 25 more beds and it would be a great help to the municipal court. That also then relieves some things that the police department does around downtown, and that's why we did that this last year. I'd like to see us add another 10. I'll have a motion for that when we get there. For this year, bringing the total to 20, and then fund the FY13 as well, so that we'd have 20 this and 10 next budget years. Also have a portion for Buckley House for this year and next. That's not the complete number that they need, but it does restore our part of what we've done over the last several years to Buckley House, and asks the county to participate as well. One of the things that the mayor and I sat through the other night during Police Commission as well was a report about the status of gang activity in our community right now. And this was just the other night, and you might have read this in the paper, that there's over 1,000 identified gang members in Eugene right now. And it's a serious issue that we need to contend with, and so that's why I want to focus some extra monies that I've done a little bit of homework to help find on that as it relates specifically to downtown and some other pieces, necessary pieces around public safety. So when the motions time comes around, I'll have those too, at least.
Councilor Ortiz.
So just, Councilor Clark, I sit on the Human Services Commission, and as far as funding Buckley House, I would encourage you to give direction to the city manager to work with the other two organizations that are at the HSC, because there was comments from both those representatives that they were also going to be asking for money for Buckley House because they realized the importance of what it is. And so if you were to do that, I would hope that you would include that in your motion. And then as far as funding for downtown officers, you know, the gang members don't live downtown, they live out in the outskirts of the community. You know, they live over in my neighborhood. So I would encourage you in Pat's neighborhood. And they probably live in your neighborhood too. But
They do.
You just don't know. So so anything to do with gang relations, you know, I wouldn't want it focused just on downtown. That, you know, because I just feel like problems are all over the community. They're not just in one part of town, and I wouldn't want to tie the chief's hands to just focusing on that. I mean, I would encourage you to put money into, if you felt that it was up to you, to put that kind of a motion on the table to say, you know, this is for the gang folks, for the gang task force. I would hope that you would hold it specific to one geographic area.
Agreed.
Anybody else with general discussion on multi-year financial?
Just a clarification. These 6 years are not capital projects.
Some of them are capital
Some.
and some are not, yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I saw the one that affects the general fund, and it was very
Right.
easy to see that.
Yeah, yeah.
But the rest of them, you know, you sort of get the context of where we are and what if we drive this car as is
Uh-huh.
with respect to other ones.
When will it go off the road?
The general fund, you can see it's about a year or two.
Uh-huh.
But I just,
Well, and part of it, as you remember, there's the different categories. So some of it is continuing current services, and some of it's implementing plans. So some of the different items might include some program costs as well as capital. And the other thing is that it may require reducing service levels or making changes or finding an ongoing source of resource to fund that service delivery.
because when I see 280 million, my very simplistic.
That's a lot.
We have the revenue and expenses, this is 280 on top. Is that correct?
That is a correct statement. So nothing that you see within the multi-year financial plan is reflected.
So the question is, either raise revenue or reduce your expectation.
So, let me put it in another context. If you were to take just a look at the 9 priority items, which is about 134 million, the pavement portion of that is just a little bit less than half. So, I'm just subtracting that out for now, because I think that's a different way that we're kind of funding that. If you do the math on that, what that would mean to fund the remaining high-priority items, it equates to about an additional 12 million per year of ongoing money. And so that's another way of thinking about it. On priority items only, if you take out the pavement, we're looking at about an additional 12 million per year of ongoing funding.
And then the second thing is that maintain current services. That is not in the priority one.
The maintain current
The
services?
second table.
In the back, what's not getting funded.
Yeah,
Oh,
is another.
What?
Just this is. Where is the second? Page 8. Page 8.
Page 8, slide 16.
Oh, yes. That's it.
oh, okay.
Continuing current services is 31,470. Now, that is, continuing current services means if we don't, this current services will,
Well, at some point, they're going to get to the point, as we talked about, that, and Kurt Corey, the Public Works Director, can answer us probably a lot better than I can, but basically what we're saying is that we're watering down the soup with the level of resource that we have available to do the operation and maintenance at those, the newly acquired land.
and PROC, priority one, what does that PROC,
Oh, pros?
pros?
Yeah.
What is that? That's a,
Our pros plan,
yeah.
is our park recreation, do you
Oh,
want
okay.
An open space.
to? Open space?
Yes, okay, okay. Thanks.
It was a plan.
It's the golf pros.
On the golf pro.
Well, and I would say that all of these documents that are referenced, and that's, as I touched on, one of the things I really like is that it links these unfunded items to specific plans and policies, and most of these, I bet, are available online, and I'm sure that the PROS plan is.
Yeah, but this sort of,
Yeah, but it starts kind of helping give you better context.
John?
So I'm looking at page 3, the highest priorities, dollar amounts, and I see pavement preservation at 64 million, and I see parks and open spaces, O&M at 12 million. In the parks and open spaces, who would be speaking to that from staff that's here? And would that be you, Kurt? Of O&M, I know that some of them are ongoing, but there would be use for one-time money for O&M, like let's say there's a restroom or whatever in a park that needs fixing, that would be a one-time, a good use of one-time money. I know cutting grass is an ongoing thing, but in that 12 million, are there specific like one-use dollars, do you think?
I think you could make that argument. I think the way that Johnny has couched this gap in the past has been, what does it take on an ongoing basis to provide a reasonable, sustainable level of service in the park system? So within that, are there one-time expenditures that you incur every 6 or 7 years? Yeah, there are.
Okay. So that would be an area that some one-time money could go to, and it wouldn't affect the sustainable budget. That we could fix a restroom. I noticed in the back one of the things was restrooms in certain parks. We may be able to fix a restroom with some one-time money, and that would help offset that $12 million.
To the degree that I
Okay.
know.
And then the other question regarding the $64 million of pavement preservation backlog, that doesn't include any, that only includes improved streets, is that correct?
That's right.
So the, and last guess I heard was how many miles of unimproved streets are in the system right now?
Oh, yeah. Are we 80?
75 or something like that?
About 75.
75 lane miles of, or 150 lane miles, because they'd be two lanes, right?
No, that's not how they do it. It's 75.
Second times, three times,
It's one street.
A lot, you can call them lanes, but on the unimproved street system, a lane is sometimes not.
Okay. So there's 75 miles that's not included in that pavement preservation
Right.
backlog that could be tacked on as well, so that
That's on top of the 150.
on top of the
It's another
150.
50, isn't it?
So, okay, that's
Exactly.
kind of what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Counselor Pryor?
Thanks. It's almost one of those things where, you don't want to know it because it's so depressing when you see it, but you have to know it anyway, because that's our job. And I realize what we're really talking about here is how do we triage the little money that we have. And I appreciate what you've done to try to triage the money we have, and what we're doing is kind of nibbling around the edges in terms of what we might be able to do to help influence that. Having worked on some of these committees, I've been really impressed with the work that we've done. The pavement preservation one, I realize how large the backlog is and how serious the problem remains, but I'm still pleased with the fact that during the term we've been on the council, we have actually addressed it in ways it never got addressed before. The problem is no longer this big, but there's still a big problem. Yeah, it's still there. And then all of these other ones as well, and like others, I look at the ones that aren't funded. And as we nibble around the edges, I'm intrigued by the notion that we really try to say which parts of the edges do we really want to focus our effort on. And you've given us your best shot for the larger picture, and I don't dispute it. So as we come into it, we have to figure out how we can do that nibbling around the edges. And I know as we talk about what I'll call the behavior side of it, because we've talked about how we have to have something, as Judge Allen says, to address the behavior side, we also have to address the condition side. And sometimes I look at that as an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And by the time you get to the jail beds, that's the cure. Whereas if you spend $1 on the prevention end, you might actually get some of those economies we're talking about. So what I would encourage us to do is to think about both the condition and the behavior and see what the best balance is we can strike, even as we know we're just nibbling around the edges. So I appreciate the work you've done. It's been incredible. It's very helpful. It could look very depressing, but I think it gives us important information that we need to have. We've got to know this stuff.
Because it is depressing.
Counselor Clark?
Right. One quick question for Kurt. Last year, in a fit of cooperation, Alan and I got together and made a motion about park O&M around a couple of specific parks, and it was Hendricks and Creekside. But that was after having set aside or found a creative way to maybe fund the development of Creekside. But it turns out that work couldn't get started this last year and needed to be moved to next year in order to wait for the second half of the carried forward funds and to be in place to develop it. So my question is that money that we set aside for O&M at Creekside from last year, will it be moved forward to once the park is actually built for 12 and 13?
Yeah, the intent of the council motion last year was that funding for the capital side would be put in place over 2 budget cycles, and then that you had intended to have a nominal amount of O&M funding in place to do that. So, yes, to the extent we build it next year, then it will be maintained at that level. I say that with the caveat that the balance of the Parks and Open Space system remains subject to this $2 million per year shortfall. So
certainly the case, and I appreciate that. That was just one little piece that we'd already worked on. I wanted to make sure that didn't get dropped in the process of solving the bigger problem as well. Thank you, sir, very much.
Any other comments, discussion around the multi-year financial plan? No, we seem to have exhausted this topic. So...
Or just exhausted.
Or you're just exhausted, yeah. So we do have some intended motions, some a little more fleshed out than others, that we could begin that conversation. I would hesitate for us to be making motions until after the public hearing, just because that's a good process in my mind to hear from the public before we start passing motions. And so I'm going to suggest that I know Councilor Clark wanted to speak, but you may still need more information before you can speak further.
Only a part. I would take a couple of minutes, I guess, if you're going to call an early break here. Is that what you're going to do? Or?
No, I was thinking of maybe starting either letting you speak to your intended motions or letting John, or starting with John's. That's what I was juggling.
I need to ask the chief one thing, and I was planning on doing it during break to make all of my information complete and ready to make 2 or 3 motions tonight. So.
Okay, so what I'm going to propose is that without actually making the motion, we speak to John's intended motion for a little while, and then
Some of it.
and then we could take an early break so that you could get your information, and then we'd have to stop for public comment at 7:30. So we'll play that a little bit by ear, so we're not too herky-jerky.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Process check, if I may. This meeting is coinciding with the HRC meeting, and the HRC has a presentation to the City Council tomorrow. I'm the HRC counselor, so I'm splitting my time here. Just to check, I heard you say that you would prefer that any motions are made after the public hearing this evening. So if I were to leave for HRC for a while, I wouldn't miss any motions then.
Right, you would miss some preliminary discussion
But not motions.
that might inform how you will eventually vote on them, but you would not miss the actual vote.
Just vote yes, it'll be okay.
Well, I've already got my vote in mind. So.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Okay. So, John, if you're ready,
Sure.
I'll take yours.
I sent this out last night, and I did it after discussing with my budget buddy some of the proper ways to go. It's very similar to the motion that I put on the table last year. It is to recommend to the City Council that if after the end-of-year audit comes up and they see how much money's left over at the end of the year, it's called marginal beginning working capital. The first $900,000 of my marginal beginning working capital is dedicated to the capital fund. What my suggested motion would be that any money, the first $200,000 after that, be put to $100,000 to the enhanced pothole program and $100,000 to parks and open spaces O&M. That's why I was asking Kurt. That's why I was asking Kurt. In my view, especially after the presentation that we just saw, I think that this is one-time monies that we may or may not realize. If it is realized, I feel that, as Councilor Pryor said, we're nibbling around the edges, but a nibble around the edge today helps, can be a bigger bite tomorrow. So they're rather insignificant amounts, but as we've seen with the pavement preservation program with the enhanced potholes, I think most of the counselors have received emails saying, gosh, that looks great. Can we do more in my neighborhoods? And I think it's been well received by the public. I think Public Works and Engineering has been happy to be able to provide that service to the community. And like I said, it's not a giant amount of money, but a little bit helps. And so it wouldn't be, sorry.
Finish your sentence.
Okay. It wouldn't be a cast in stone. This would be a recommendation for the council when they look at their supplemental budget in December. Last year it was worded the same way. It was a recommendation to the council. I think it gives weight if it comes from the full budget committee. It gives weight to staff saying this is something that the budget committee and the citizens and the council felt might be an appropriate use for that, and it helped guide it. Last year they did end up at supplemental budget 1 putting the money that was recommended to the enhanced pothole program, and I think Kurt might say that it was received well. Everything that I've heard said that it was received well. So that's kind of what I'm saying. If there's extra money, these are good.
We'll run on sentence.
Thank you. German grammar.
Councilor Polling.
I have a couple questions. One, the 300,000 that's set aside for Creekside for this FY12, is that coming out of the 900,000? Now, so then we're talking 600,000 would be left for his 200,000 to be deducted from? Or is that 300,000 being set aside and then we try to reach that 900,000?
The way last year the motion is the first 300, essentially the first 300,000 of marginal working capital goes to Creekside Park. The next 600,000 goes to General Fund Capital Projects Fund. This would be the next 100,000 goes to, I guess, potholes, and the next 100,000 would go to parks. And so that's how I understand how this would work. So the total would be 9, 10, 11. 1.1 million of marginal beginning working capital would be, the first 1.1 million would be committed. Creekside, capital projects, potholes, and then parks.
In that order,
So
right?
we may not actually see that 900,000. Is that correct? That might be in the hole?
At any given time with beginning marginal working capital, whatever that is.
Beginning working
It,
capital.
it could be anywhere from 0 to multiple millions, because it's just as revenues come and go through the year, and you get those fluctuate. Sometimes we have more than at others. So,
Okay. And then the 100,000 that's set aside for enhanced pothole programs, could that be used for the Sandy Drive project? That's been done, but we haven't found the dollars for it. And I can't remember what the amount was for that, but it wasn't a great amount.
The answer is yes, it would be the type of money used for a project like that, although as it currently stands, we would be funding that particular project through the current budget as proposed.
So what you're saying is that that project's already funded?
There is a component of the road fund budget for the, what we refer to as the expanded pothole program, so $200,000 per year through the forecast period, and the rate that we talked about is part of the upcoming year.
So at the upcoming Harlow Neighborhood Association meeting, I can tell the folks that that money is been allocated and it will get done?
Yeah, we can even get you a message indicating what we see as the plan for this year.
Appreciate it.
And you know, in fairness, we've hedged on letting folks know what it is we can and can't do, subject to the budget process and subject to a number of these unimproved streets not lending themselves to the type of maintenance overlay that we put on something. So
That's
it's not.
because I haven't been forwarding the emails to you.
Okay, there's the technical side of it and the financial side of it, and they need to meet up before we can schedule those.
Councilor Clark.
I'll be happy to second this motion when you finally make it, because I think that it goes along well with what we've always used with this kind of standing $900,000 as something that we use to try and enhance our capital needs. I think all of your motions pieces do that. I think that makes good sense for it to be there in that way. That, and I, like George, I don't know that I've passed a week in the last year where I haven't heard 3 times a week from somebody who lives on Morningside Drive or Holly Avenue in Ward 5 looking to find out if they're going to get a maintenance overlay this year. So if we can enhance the capacity and likelihood of those folks getting served, I think that would be a wonderful thing. So.
Councilor Brown.
I just have a question. We learned late last week that EWEB is going to give the city $2.2 million extra silts. Is that correct?
That's what we anticipate. We haven't got the check yet, but that's what we anticipate.
Right, but it's, okay. The check's in the mail, good.
So it's not in the mail yet, but
So how does that fit into all that fit into our discussion here? Does that mean that we could give more to Buckley House and more to some of the other things, or do we want to keep some in reserve, or does it go to the general fund? What is the recommendation?
my recommendation is that the check isn't in the mail. We are anticipating that. We're anticipating it also to be one-time dollars, because a big portion, the vast majority of that money is, and almost $2 million of it is very volatile dollars, and so there's no guarantee of that at all as we move into the future. So we're not going to budget that money into the future because we just don't know. My recommendation is that we put that money into our reserves. One, that helps, we still have the gap as we go into next year, that $5 million gap, so we put that into that to help be able to sort of bridge or help us close that gap as we keep moving down the road. So my suggestion is we put that in there, we not spend those dollars right now. Are they actually available? Yes. If you choose to appropriate against those dollars, you can do that, but my recommendation is that we don't.
Okay.
Got you down, Betty. Councilor Zelinka.
Just FYI, there's another street project that needs to be put on the list, which is the area right around the Matthew Knight Arena and the new dorms, the amount of, and the new apartment complex, the amount of large trucks that have gone through Villard and 15th there have completely trashed the street. The U of O had responsibility to rebuild, and they did a good job of rebuilding up to the middle of the street on Villard. But the rest of the street is on the verge of going off the edge of your curve, John, into being the expensive type of 5 times more than getting it fixed. So that intersection right there has just got an enormous amount of traffic from heavy vehicles, and it really needs to be addressed before it becomes a much more expensive problem. It's got all the alligatoring and cracking, and the potholes are starting to show up.
Is that it?
Yep.
Councilor Folling.
Well, in reading the email that John sent to us about the projected money from the EWEB, it gave me a great deal of concern. I personally would not have liked to have known about it until it was actually in the bank. So do you think, or would it be necessary to put your suggestion in the form of a motion that the Budget Committee not consider that $2.2 million for the time being until it's actually cash in the bank? I don't want to get into an argument here at the table about, okay, well, we're going to get this money, and then we commit ourselves to using some money, and it doesn't come in at 2.2, it comes in at 0.8. Then what are we going to do? So what I want to do is guarantee that we don't bank on that money, or we don't count on that money until it's actually in the bank.
The surest way for the Budget Committee would be if you have that kind of a motion, they choose to do that. From my perspective, however, eventually the committee and the council chooses to appropriate dollars, my strong suggestion is we just bank that based on what we still have as a volatile financial system as we go forward. And so that's still my suggestion. So how you choose to do that, whether you just don't use that as money or you make a motion, would be up to the committee.
I think
Christie wanted to weigh in.
Sorry, just one quick thing. The other thing that I want to point out, so the SILT wholesale funding that's expected to be increasing over
What
the
does SILT stand for?
contribution in lieu of taxes.
Let Christie answer.
Thank you for helping. Stereo doesn't help. It's contribution in lieu of taxes. It's payment received from EWEB. And what they're projecting is the wholesale. And the wholesale portion of the money that we receive is the most volatile. And the other thing I'd like to point out about that is, so there's some uncertainty with exactly the amount that we will receive. It's forecasted that we're going to receive a $2.2 million increase. But the other thing is that we have a lot of other revenues that also are volatile. We have property taxes that we will get more information on in the fall, and some other places that we really rely on our whole portfolio, to use that word, of revenues that we have available to us to sort of balance things out. And so on any given year, one is up, the other's down, and this helps cushion
don't all
and
go up,
prepare
some
for
go
that.
down.
So that's the only other thing that I would put out there as a cautionary note about committing those funds too early is that we don't know where the other revenues will land at.
I may or may not be putting on a motion.
He's waiting for direction.
I've got you on that.
Oh, okay.
Councilor Taylor.
Thank you. I agree with John, the manager, that we should put it in, bank the money. And I don't think we should be counting on extra money right now or counting on spending them. We have lots of unmet needs, and they should be considered in relation to all the other unmet needs instead of just saying, oh, here's some money, let's spend it for this. Like if you get a check in the mail, you say, oh, what could I buy with that? But I think it needs more consideration and more time, and I don't think we should count on it at all. I'm in favor of adopting the budget as it is now, actually, without adding anything. And then later, if we have more money, we consider any need in relationship to all the other needs.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you. I first started doing some homework on the eWeb silt after talking to some board members about 3 weeks ago about parts of this, and the manager did a good job of, in his email, showing the 3 different revenue components of the silt, the wholesale rates that he's spoken to, the retail electric rates, and the steam rates. Now, the electric retail rates are fairly solid. Even Roger Gray will tell you that's a fairly predictable number that's not going to vary too much at all. Yes, the wholesale rate does. But they had a rate increase this last year that affects what we're doing, and it wasn't calculated in the original projection just because of the timing and the projection of usage. However, there's 1.1 million in the retail side that's fairly stable, that we know or we have at least much better confidence will be coming. And secondarily, there's another rate increase scheduled to take effect in November. So I would suggest that there are parts of this that have volatility to them, but based on the homework that I did, I think that some portions of this may have some degree of reliability. But my intention in the first place with my motions was to put in the wording that provided the eWeb silt money comes in at the increased level that we expect, then we would spend in that capacity.
One of the things we do need to recognize, and this is why, as Christy mentioned in the total context, if you were to take a look, if you were to pick apart our forecast on the revenue side for the silt, that the FY13 projection that we have in our 6-year forecast actually comes in, accounts for all but approximately 320,000, I think, of increase on the retail side, and by the time you get out to FY14, we're actually matching pretty close to what they already anticipate. So we have built into the out years the rate increases. What's the new part of the new information that I think has come to light is that there's this one-time money that's showing up in FY12 for us, which is the unanticipated dollars, the out-year dollars. We pretty well put into our budget based on what we already know, and that's reflected in the 6-year forecast.
And I still have any.
You still have time, yep.
Well, that's why I crafted my motions to get them under the $1.1 million number, which is essentially the retail portion of that 2.2, or it's 1.3 million, I guess, that's expected in the retail of this next year, so that it would be the portion that is much more reliable or stable in this next year's budget rather than banking on the wholesale rates.
And recognize, and I can ask Sue to respond to, but that 1.1 is all, in our forecast, actually, it's not now we're going to bump up 1.1 because we've already accounted for the vast majority of that 1.1 in our long-term forecast. It's the one-year piece that is it's the one-time money that shows up this year, not the forecast going forward.
No, and that's exactly what I'm saying, is that it's the $1.1 million unanticipated for this fiscal.
Right.
And that's the only thing I'm talking about spending.
It'd be okay to have, so I think that's accounted for, so I don't know.
We can talk, but what I don't think so. There is the new money that's showing up this year. That's the one-time money, right?
I love the irony of him wanting to spend and her wanting to save. just saying.
So I put myself in the queue, and I do want to remind us, I think this conversation about the silt money is important, but also we're started this conversation like teeing off of John's motion. But I would not support a motion to restrict the use of any particular funds partly because I think the same principles apply to all of our potential funds, and I think Christie pointed out quite well in terms of the volatility. Our property tax revenues, are forecast, and we don't really know what they are until they actually are in the bank. So I think the same principles apply, and I took to heart the city manager's recommendation not to glom onto that money, and so in my intended motion, I did look to shift some proposed funding from the what the city manager was recommending rather than switching my motion, although I had that information when I crafted it. So I just wanted to point that out. And Shanda.
Continuing on the silk conversation, I appreciate the expertise of the staff on this and the focus on savings and the conversation about how there's volatility in some of the other revenues coming in, and this could help even that out. Question I have is, I'm imagining that this could impact the beginning working capital balance if these come in at higher than expected or whatever, then we could have more to start next year with. I know we're still on John's motion, but I'm wanting to jump toward Claire's motion on just throwing it out there. I'm wondering if, we don't want to tap into it a whole lot, but could we tap into it at $150,000? I don't know. So something to think about. That's it.
Councilor Ortiz.
So, George, you had me at your first motion, but I saw there was some eye contact and this and that, and so so I get it. But I'm of the mind with John, because I think that I appreciate what we do here at the table as far as the budget committee, and this is where we get to kind of play poker with each other. But not that I do support all of the motions, but I don't want to supersede what the priorities are that these guys worked on. If there was money to be added to the budget, would these be? This wasn't part of the, what was identified by the city as the next things to fund. So so I just kind of wanted to make that comment. My particular motion, I've kind of been talking to John about it, and I'm going to go with less than what I'm originally requested, and they're going to do some follow-up on it so that we can get more information on it as far as how they're utilized and get a report on that particular item. So, but I kind of agree with John. I mean, I don't have any angst about, if there's money identified from someplace else, really is what kind of we're supposed to be doing. Kind of like begging from Paul and stealing to Peter or whatever that is, then that's kind of what we're supposed to be doing. And it was very lucky that that money and that came to us, that Mike had something to put his hook on really quick. But the rule has been that we're supposed to identify where that money's coming from. And if that money hadn't come, I was curious where you would thought you would be able to do this, just out of curiosity.
Would you like an answer?
Yeah, if it's okay.
I worked on the homework for finding the money before I developed the other ones, and that's the part of this that's a little bit odd for me, in that I put a bit of work and discussions with folks into where we might identify some resources in order to do this. It's what I've done in past years with working with George around unused city properties that we could sell and find some extra monies in order to key in on some things that I think are very important for us to deal with. I thought it was important based on hearing the report, and I think that I venture that if anybody at this table saw the half-hour PowerPoint that we saw on gang activity in our community, that you'd agree with me that having a few more jail beds would help the police department at this time. So that's why I did the work to try and find the money, so that I didn't have to have an argument at the table about what we cut, but instead look for how can we find a creative way to solve a problem that I think is under-addressed with the current budget.
Okay. Andrew, it's still your time?
No, I'm done.
Okay. John is next, and then Councilor Taylor.
Just moving up, since it's kind of general discussion here, and I don't see it in the packet in front of me, but in the packet that I got transmitted electronically early today, thank you very much, Mia, I noticed that one of the, we talked last time about what the cuts at county were going to be and how they would come across, and I saw those, and one of the things that came up, and it's been on the table at this committee in years past, was the Lane Regional Air LRAPA, and in the thing that I saw electronically, it said that Lane County is going to stop funding LRAPA, and Springfield is going to stop funding LRAPA. And I'm just kind of wondering if you could talk to that, John, about where you think the city of Eugene is going to go with LRAPA. It was just, it said we hadn't decided yet, but I know that that's been an interest of this committee in years past, and I would just love to hear what staff has to say about that.
Our budget, my budget includes continued funding of LRAP at the same rate that we did last year, and it's approximately $156,000, plus or minus, $153,000. So the proposed budget includes that same amount as it was last year.
And I guess my question being, and nobody may know this at this point, but I mean, the way that I understood LRAPA, there was a city component, there was a county component, there was a Springfield component, and when this all came up the last time, both of those backed off a little bit, and I think we may have even stepped up a little bit, or kept the same. And I'm just wondering if we're losing two legs of the stool, is that stool going to tip over? I mean, has anybody contacted LRAPA and said, are you going to tip over if you lose the county and Springfield? Again, this is one of those things that we'd like.
Councilor Ortiz has some information.
So I'm the liaison from the City Council to the LRAPA board, and this isn't the first time that organizations haven't been able to pay their dues.
Right.
They're not unfunding them out of a political sense that they don't want to play anymore. They're unfunding them because their budget doesn't allow them.
Sure.
And they get a lot of their money from Title V funds and from permitting and stuff. I mean, they need our commitment to participate to continue, and they need our dollars. But they've been shrinking in their footprint, for quite a while. So what we haven't heard is that it's still a three-legged stool because they're still willing to come to the table. It has to be two contiguous organizations, so it's Eugene and Springfield or Eugene and Lane County. And if they both decide, if Springfield and Lane County both say, we're done playing this game because it's by state legislature the way it was designed, then it'll tip over. But that's not what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is there's no money to pay the dues. And so those are two different conversations. And we haven't heard that they're not willing to play anymore because those representatives are still involved. They still come to every meeting, and they're still participating. So I think that there is a financial piece, and I think it's realistic. Some of these, Lane County and Springfield are very hurting, and so, I mean, I understand it, and I'm just really grateful that John put, the amount that he could into the budget for us, because it's my priority living in the west side of Eugene, where I think Oregon Toxics Alliance did a little survey, and I think 17 out of the 18 businesses that are that are permitted through the Oregon Toxics Alliance are in my ward and part of Pat's. So, I mean, it's important to me that we keep that organization.
Anything else, John?
No, I just saw it, and I was hoping to get more information about it.
Page 4 of your...
Councilor Taylor.
Well, this isn't why I started to talk, but John, LRAPA stands for Air Protection Agency.
I'm sorry. Okay.
And it's a Lane County used to be Air Pollution Authority, now it's Air Protection Agency. And it's rather important, and I'm glad it's still in the budget. And I think Andrea deserves to breathe, and so do all the rest of us. But I wanted to respond to Mike's thing. He didn't want to argue at the table about gangs. I think we could have an argument about whether jail beds are the solution for gang activity and whether that's a cure for gangs, and rather than an argument about whether there's money. That's just a thought.
Councilor Polling?
Jail beds aren't the solution, but it is another tool in the belt to use for gangs. Andrea, I do have a question. without funding from Lane County and Springfield, how is El Rapa going to function if it just our...
They get about 80% of their money from the state. So the contribution from Lane County, us, and Springfield, thank you, is about 20%.
And we're probably half that.
How much were they putting into Lane County and Springfield? How much were they putting into the annual?
I don't have the budget in front of me, I'm sorry.
Probably.
I think we are putting the most in, though.
Probably
I mean,
combined less than us is my guess.
Yeah.
I don't know that for sure.
So probably 10% cut.
Yeah.
So without our contribution, then, it would tip over. Or can they function on 80%?
Well, you know, they would just lay people off like everybody else would. I mean, as long as the organizations are saying to the state legislatures, we want this organization, because they're the ones that created it and they're the ones that can dismantle it, is my understanding. So as long as they're willing to continue to work together on these issues of air quality, we're okay. The funding, you know, it'll be less people, less initiatives, less opportunities for people to get the information that they need about making better decisions on wood stoves or air conditioners or, you know, bad air days. I mean, the things, the services they provide, but they would still stay there.
So there are other cities involved. Oak Ridge is in this.
Yeah,
also.
Oak Ridge and...
Cottage Grove. Have they unfunded it out of their budget?
Cottage Grove did Cottage Grove did last year. I haven't heard that they're not going to this year, and I think they donate maybe under 10,000, maybe like 5 or 6 or something like that. I don't know if that's in the budget or not. We haven't finished our budget process.
Just seems like that with all the defunding from other agencies, the city's asking to pick up the slack in a lot of places, and although it's the same amount that we funded last year, I don't think it's I just don't think it's fair that we continue putting money into it if all the other cities, or majority of the cities that are involved in El Rapa, are defunding, but still participating. I think we should take the same approach. I think we should continue to participate and use that $150,000 for other worthwhile objectives.
Well, George, in my community, this is a very worthwhile objective. I mean, I can't tell you the work that they've done to calm the nerves of people. The air's gotten better. You know, they've had conversations with J.H. Baxter and, you know, concerns about other, you know, pollutants in the area. And, you know, the staff there, I think, is just like the city staff. They work really hard. They look outside the box. They try to figure out ways to get grants and, you know, to do initiatives. And so I would challenge you on that.
Andrea, I don't doubt that one bit, but what I'm saying is that other cities and the county can come to the table and still participate without any financial input into it. I think we should do the same thing. We should still continue to participate. I just think that we should take that $150,000 and put it up. It's only fair. It's only a fair thing I think we should do.
An impact of that.
Ramin.
Yes, I want a question for John, but sometimes, having heard this discussion, sometimes in terms of donation, you could do a matching fund. One thing is that every $10 another unit, you match it, so that helps. But my question to John on your motion, for me to educate myself on your motion, what is your hunch that what marginal beginning working capital will be, your hunch? And what are you going to get for 100,000 for these different items, and why not 200 or not 3? I mean, what made you think,
my thinking on the dollar amount of the 100 and 200,000 was it was enough to have an impact on the programs, but it wasn't too much to impact John's savings accounts. So that's where the 100,000 to each one of those programs, in my mind, came from. As far as what my feeling of the marginal beginning working capital is going to be, obviously staff can give you a better, I mean, they say this is what we think we're going to have, and whatever comes out. Historically, 2 years ago, there was $385,000 total. Last year, there was $5.2 million. My feeling, we're rolling the dice out here. I think that staff has done such a good job of being efficient and saving monies, and that's where it shows up, is in the marginal beginning working capital. So I'll put on the table today that I think the marginal beginning working capital that will come out in December will be $2.85 million. That's just my
Only
guess.
two significant digits.
Who's going to fade him?
Yes. I think.
And he'll make up the difference.
And how much potholes and Parks Department impact would there be?
That's Kurt.
At least 300.
The 100, because there's two 100,000 items. Just want to get a general sense of what would be the output of.
What do you get for
What would
it?
that buy?
Yeah, it would be $100,000 of deferred O&M work in the park system. And I haven't asked the staff to dig into it enough to say what specifically would you do with that funding. But, again, the annual gap is substantial enough that we pick them.
And same with the pavement potholes, enhanced potholes.
Yeah, good question on the pothole program. Some of the projects that you get a big bang for the buck, as I recall, the Bond Lane project was on the order of $60,000, fairly significant project. So, a $50,000 project is meaningful in that world. Now, what streets would we select given the additional money? I don't know, and I wouldn't hazard that tonight. But it's that type of work that comes from that.
Councilor Zelinka.
Just an FYI, I have a Fairmont Neighborhood Association meeting, so when we break here, I'll be going to that, and I won't be coming back until tomorrow. But I guess the bottom line with El Rapa for me is what we buy with El Rapa is we buy better air quality. And the impact of reducing the funding for El Rapa, whether that be from the city of Eugene or any of the other communities, is we get poorer air quality. And to me, that's a very bad trade-off. So that's why I'm a big supporter of El Rapa. And so trading off $150,000 for poorer air quality isn't what I would like to see happen. Other communities don't step up to the plate in many funds that we have. For instance, last meeting I pointed that out, or 2 meetings ago, about the Human Services Commission in Springfield. I mean, they have 6 to 8% of the funds and get 20% of the services from the people that get there. They don't pay their fair share, and they're probably not going to pay their fair share of El Rapa. And one of the things we do in response to that is we redirect some of the program, the monies that we put into HSC to specifically fund Eugene programs. Yeah. I'm wondering, Andrea, if that's a possibility that direct having those our money directed at Eugene.
We do have an air
programs.
monitor now at Peterson Barn, and they've actually taken the one from Amazon, and then there's one.
It goes back and forth, doesn't it?
I think that it's not going to be doing that anymore.
Oh, okay.
And I know that they've done something in Oak Ridge, but the one that they did in Oak Ridge is grant funded. So, and I don't know that there's one in Springfield. So, I mean, I feel like we've gotten our fair share of their time and money and effort and, their energy. I think we've gotten a good bang for the buck. I don't know what the return on investment would be. I mean, that would be a question that I could ask them to see how much, our monies actually have how much they've been able to get other monies with the money that because they do a lot of grant writing.
Yeah.
A lot, so.
There's not really Eugene-specific programs that we could target with that money.
There actually is a couple of initiatives that I don't really want to take the time about, but I'll give them I'll wrap a report that are Eugene-specific.
And if the stool fell over, it's not like ORAPA goes away. What we end up with is DEQ, right?
Yeah, right.
And all of you that have dealt with DEQ, El Rapa is a very locally controlled and responsive organization, and having this default back to DEQ, I think would be a bad idea for this community.
Yes, it would. I've dealt with them on other
Me
issues.
too. They're dramatically underfunded.
Would anybody else like to be in the queue? So we're getting into that squishy time between needing to take a break, and I'm seeing proposals for a break. So I'm going to propose that we break until, we're going to take a slightly long break till 7:25, so that we're back and seated in time for 7:30 public comment, public hearing.
And are we doing that here?
I believe we will do it in here, but if 25 people show up between now and when our break is over, then we will adjourn and reconvene in the other room. But for now, we're coming back here.
Claire, we can, by people will show up.
They can just sit here and I'll give my best to experience. I can't. I'll stay. I'm on the agenda.
Thank you so much.
I'm missing something. Oh, no, I just moved to different pages. Oh, yeah.
All right.
Too many papers.
All right, thank you for reconvening so quickly. We are going to move into our public hearing portion of our meeting, and we have three people who would like to give public comment. So the public hearing is a legal requirement and an opportunity for members of the public to comment on budget priorities. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Budget committee members may ask clarifying questions of those testifying and will be given an opportunity to comment on what they've heard from the public at the end of the public hearing. And the three folks I have are Mayor Piercy, followed by Robert Roth, followed by Scott Olms.
George, swing that microphone more.
I hadn't planned on speaking tonight, but after I listened to the discussion, I just felt like there were a couple things that I wanted to share with you that I was thinking about. And I just wanted to honor the discussion you're having and the choices that you have to make and the situation that we face as a city and we face as a community. But I really wanted to just say, you know, this discussion is really about how we understand this recession in our community. It's really how we understand what's happening to people in our community and families in our community. And so as I thought about that, and I thought about the things you were discussing, I thought, you know, what they want to know is that we have them in mind. What they want to know is that, like them, we understand we have to tighten our belts, we have to live a little bit more simply, we have to be sure that every decision we make is cost effective, and that we have to keep on trying to provide the best services we can under the conditions we find ourselves in, and under the conditions we find everybody else in. And so I just wanted to remind you that when you think about public safety, we're bringing in a new police station and we're bringing in new officers right now. So it's not like we're not in the process of adding to our public safety at this very time. I wanted to remind you that we actually provide a whole lot of human services, and I wanted to help you, if I could, think about the fact that when right now as we see our social service agencies losing funding and under such stress, I wanted to remind you that there are human services that this city provides all the time. Making sure that people are able to get around and have transportation in the city. Making sure that when people can't afford to go other places to be, that they have good parks that they can inexpensively recreate in. Making sure that people have access when they can't afford to go to the movies or they can't afford to travel. They can go to our library and have a full range of wonderful activities. Those don't end up on the human services line item chart, but they are the really fundamental things we provide that keep a good quality of life and are part of what we provide as a city. And when you think about human services, you should think of those kinds of items. You should think about the things that we do every day in all of our programs. We are known across this country for everything that we try to provide in an accessible way for everyone. That's a very special thing that we do that's in the human service side of the list. So I just caution you to think, when you want to think about adding services, I just caution you to think about all the services that are already in our budget and we're struggling to incrementally add to, and to really think about those families and what we're really here for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Piercy. Robert Roth?
Okay, I guess that's a tough act to follow because I'm going to ask for some money. My name's Robert Roth. I'm here on behalf of myself and my daughter Rebecca Roth to ask you to recommend enough additional funds for adaptive recreational services at the Hilliard Community Center so they can hire one more staff person, a full-time staff person, and so they'd have enough resources to get another specially equipped van to permit more outings as part of their activities. I apologize for coming in so late with this request. I've only recently learned why the resources I'm talking about are needed, and I think they're important enough. I just want to bring them to your attention. I've given an email to the members of the committee that have more details on what the services are that the Hilliard Community Center does and what Adaptive Rec is all about. The Hilliard Center is part of the wonderfulness of Eugene, I think, that the mayor was alluding to. It's become a national model for the work that it does, helping people with developmental disabilities such as Down syndrome and others. My daughter Rebecca, an adult who has Down syndrome, has enjoyed participating in programs at the Hilliard Center for many years. A lot of what made it work for her, as I've come to realize, is that there was staffing continuity. She could deal with the same person over a period of time. The person and the staff and the members of the group would get to know each other, and that was an important part of what made it work. Recently, when there's been a lot of turnover in the group, I've come to realize that I've learned that all the staff at the community center, except the ones who do the program planning and devise all those programs, are part-timers and without benefits. And so, as we all know, when you've got that kind of a position, we were lucky for a long period of time to have staffing continuity, but it was just luck. And now they're in a position of everybody they hire is pretty much on a part-time basis and almost has to start looking for something else pretty quickly if they want to have a full-time job. Now, the kind of work I'm talking about is not rocket science. Like the work of this group, I think, it's infinitely more complex, challenging, and important. To do it well, a person needs experience with a particular client, to know what is needed and how to provide it, and dedication to do it over a long period of time. And that's the only way I think you can get that is with at least one. We'd like to get at least one full-time position. When I reviewed this statement, Rebecca was concerned that people now filling these positions, these part-time positions, not lose their jobs. And so I want to be clear, we're trying to get funding for one more position, a full-time, in addition to what the community center already has. The group also used to go on outings most of the time, the group that Rebecca's been involved with in particular, traveling to places like Strike City and Camp Putt to get together in a van and have a good time. But the outings have become more limited, and now some of the programs are saying, well, maybe only once a month out of 4 or 5 sessions. And I've discovered that's because there is more demand than the center can meet with the 2 vans that it has. So that's why we're asking for the funds to get a 3rd van. I don't know how realistic it is, but I hope you'll consider it seriously. I certainly think it's important, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Robert. Scott Olms, or Almost?
Good evening, Mayor Piercy, City Council members, Budget Committee members, and Mr. Reese, City Manager. My name is Scott Almost, and I currently work for the City of Eugene as a fire captain for the city. I also work as the president for the Eugene Firefighters Local 851, and it is in that capacity that I'm here to talk to you tonight. Sven Walrus, the vice president of our union, spoke to you at the 2 first Budget Committee meetings, and here I'm here to reiterate our position and concerns with the current budget. Chief Randy Groves has worked diligently to streamline our fire department and find cost-saving innovations. We have reduced administrative staff and found cost savings through functional consolidation with the Springfield Fire and Life Safety, Chief Groves and I have continued to discuss ways to deliver our service better and more efficient. As a result of the 1.8 across-the-board budget reduction in the fire department, we will see a reduction in staffing, which will result in reduced services to our community. This difficult balancing act provided to the fire protection and ambulance services, an already overloaded and demanding system, has forced Chief Groves to choose between one of the two main issues that our fire department faces. Those choices are ambulance transport or first response fire protection, both which have been identified as core essential services. The reduction of the fire company in the Whitaker neighborhood will have an impact on both of these issues. The reduction in staffing will remove a fire suppression and emergency medical response from our community. While the fire department has identified a need for an increased ambulance due to the capacity in the system, this change of upstaff and ambulance should not come at the expense of a fire company. Although topics of response times, service reliability modes, ambulance transport, and staffing levels seem to cloud the issue, the choice to reduce staffing will come at a cost to our community. There are no optimal solutions right now. However, the potential damage of reducing the fire coverage is not worth the risk. I urge you to review and reconsider this reduction in public safety. Thank you, and I'll take any questions if you have.
Thank you, Scott. Is there anyone else wishing to speak at the public hearing? No. All right, I officially close our public hearing, and we can start a queue for questions, comments, responses, and I see Councilor Ortiz.
So Scott, I don't know if you want to answer from that point, but I don't know if Chief Groves is here or... No. Go ahead. So it was our understanding that that it was a redirection of services. It's not going to be that there are any firefighters that are going to be losing their jobs. Is that correct?
I guess what I would say in the question asked is you will see a direct company in the Whitaker neighborhood closed.
At 2nd and Chambers.
At 2nd and Chambers. Currently, there are 3 pieces of equipment out of that station. Under Chief Groves' direction, there will be 2 pieces of equipment. One of them will no longer be a truck company that will respond on a regular basis. It will be a swing company that will respond. And in place of that,
so it'll do either or whatever is needed when they tap out.
Yes, that's correct. If they're in quarters. Now, mind you that, go ahead.
So at this point, are there 3 different staffing components for each of the rigs?
There is not. Currently, Fire Station 2 houses a truck company, which is a specialized piece of equipment. And the second thing it staffs is a fire engine, which is what's normally staffed in all other fire stations. What is slated to take place is that fire truck company will become an either-or. 3 Captain 1s will be removed, and 3 engineers will also be removed. And when I say that, I mean there will be no reductions in staff in the fact that there will be no demotions or requirements of the chief to lay anyone off. It's through attrition. So I guess the easiest answer for that is we will see a reduction out of that station by that entire company responding.
And there's 3 positions that actually go away.
That's correct.
Yeah, there'll be 3 less
firefighters.
In that station?
Correct.
And when is that?
Across the...
Okay, so when is that slated to happen?
July 1st.
And so there's people retiring by then?
That is the anticipation that we will have retirements prior to then. But bar no questions, there will be a reduction in your fire department by this action.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm writing down names. Okay, so I put myself in the queue. Would it be possible for tomorrow to get an estimate on what adding the additional FTE at the Hilliard Community Center would entail?
Thank you.
Oh, I actually had
you have a question for Scott, too? Okay.
as well, but might be more of a budget or
Well,
finance
hang
staff
out.
question.
It's really well dressed.
I feel a little underdressed.
We weren't going to say anything.
Your sandwich was
As long as you don't dress me down too much, I'll be all right.
Oh, God, good job.
And then my second question, so it sounds like that second company at the fire station, I understand it's a complex dynamic, but that the 3 FTE is part of the reason for reducing that company, that it would be 3 FTE that would need to be in place for that company to continue. Is that
That's correct.
correct?
Approximately, and I can check with Chief Brackets here, but I believe it's about $317,000 to restore that.
Thank you. That was the nut of the question.
The other piece of that, though, just the The other piece of that is if we restored those three positions, the captain's positions, the folks that would be on the ambulance would no longer be on the ambulance. So the ambulance service would no longer be in place. The 4th ambulance would go away. They would restore it back to the way it was, which would cost $300,000. To have the ambulance and the restoration, that's about another $1 million.
In addition to the 317.
The 317 would be a part of the $1 million. So it would be $1 million to continue with the ambulance and to restore the company back at Station 2.
If I could just clarify also your comments. We are just asking to maintain the current service that is there. The 4th ambulance is in addition to the plan. That service is not currently offered right now.
But it's part of the reorganization proposal that the chief is...
It's part of the plan, I believe, to try and assist with the ambulance transport issue and that funding with the capacity issue that we currently face.
Very complicated.
So does that mean you restored it?
Hold on. Councilor Zelenka, I'll put you in the queue. And that was my questions. Thank you. So I've got Councilor Clark, Councilor Taylor, Doug, and then Zelenka and...
My third intended motion was around this issue. And I wasn't prepared to make it this evening because of the difference in information that was just presented. And I want to kind of drill down on that a little bit more so that I get a better understanding of what the choice is. I'd love to talk better about that. I never want to see us... Scott, I want to ask you something too here. So I never want to see us losing first responders or making a decrease in first responders if we can possibly help it. So as I'm hearing this, though, it's a choice between keeping the status quo or trying to solve the problem the multifaceted problem we have of shrinking revenue base and a crying need with regard to ambulance service. So my understanding is the proposed solution takes a little bit off of the budget but gives us an additional ambulance which helps solve that part of the problem, but then we're losing full capacity response with the fire truck. Is that correct, John, Mr. Manager?
Yes. Let me restate that to make sure I understand, and you guys can fill in. Yes. What the proposal is, it saves $300,000. The way it saves $300,000 is 3 FTE go away. And what that does is it takes what were 9 folks, reduces it to 6. Those 6 move on to an ambulance rather than onto a truck company, right?
Or backfilling on additional apparatus.
Right,
That's correct.
backfilling.
Yes.
So we gain an ambulance, so we go from 3 to 4 ambulances, which is a need. It reduces from 2 fully staffed rigs here to only 1 staffed rig over here.
So as I understand it, and then I'll let both of you respond. As I understand it, we have a threefold choice if we're going to address this issue. 1, leave it alone and let the new ambulance come into service and save the money.
Right.
Number 2, try and add back the 326, but we'll have to revert to the status quo and lose the ambulance.
Correct.
And the third solution would be find $1 million and have both.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else you guys want to?
You have a good grasp of where we are. That was exactly it.
I believe you're correct. The concerns that we have from the locals' perspective is firefighter safety. We're concerned about citizen safety and the first response of that piece of equipment getting out the station. As we know, and as I'm sure Chief Brack can testify to, our ambulances are all over town, including Lane County. So to rely that that ambulance will be sitting in that fire station when your emergency comes is very unlikely. The chances that engine company being able to help you or that trunk company out of that station, which is the second busiest fire station in the city of Eugene, is tremendously more improved and has a better chance of, 1, putting out the fire in a faster response, and also making it for a medical emergency, whether that's in the Whitaker neighborhood or any other neighborhood in the city of Eugene.
Thanks, guys, very much.
Short of this...
You're in the queue, sorry. That's what I had not admit. So, Alan, I know you
hard, isn't it?
want to speak
No.
before you go?
Nope.
Okay, sorry about that.
Alan was the other one earlier.
Councilor Taylor.
Is part of the problem that we're putting money into Springfield, the combination of,
No, ma'am.
No, in fact, we're saving money as a result of doing that,
and do you think it's more important to put out fires than to rush people to the hospital?
I'd love to take that one first.
Depends on whether it's your fire or it's your heart attack. Absolutely.
I think it might be.
I just want to make sure that we're clear on what's happening. The first response fire engine that will be lost out of that station, a fire company, does a variety of different things. You're right, it does do fire suppression. 80%, I believe, the time is it's conducting medical motor vehicle accidents or all types of hazards. My concern is by losing that company, we don't have someone that can respond in place of that. We have to rely on the surrounding areas to respond into that area of need. So yes, you're right in the fact that we have fire companies that it's important to put the fires out, and ambulances to transport. They're still part of both of our organization, but they too do very different functions. The first arriving engine company or fire company is there to start the initial care of paramedic care. All of our pieces of equipment have life-sustaining paramedic equipment on it, and therefore able to start stabilize. The transport component is usually a component that takes place later on, after the patient has been stabilized, after the patient has received the necessary medications or interventions. That's when that component comes in. So equally as important.
So if you had a choice, you'd leave it the way it is?
If I had a choice, I'd restore the fire company, address the ambulance transport issue a different way.
And that wouldn't cost any extra money?
$317,000
of ongoing money.
Doug?
You guys can take a break, I don't have anything for you. Mr. Roth, I appreciated the email that you sent out. I read through it 1.5 times.
Thank you.
And my question or a comment is, I think a city, a community can define itself in how it handles its special needs kids, and I appreciate your public testimony and your letter. A couple of questions for you. I got the sense that the 2 vans that you were talking about, were there anything special about those vans that weren't accommodating? Or did you just want to add an additional
No,
van?
what's happening is there are 2 vans, I don't understand the details, but they're both specially equipped to handle all kinds of
Okay, so
disabilities.
your issue wasn't
No, the issue is that
existing
those 2 vans are overcommitted,
Okay, so
and
you're
so...
just talking about a third, okay.
Trying to get a third.
You know, I don't know if there's any room in the budget for an additional FTE, but that shouldn't preclude your issues, and I would encourage you, I know the staff, most of the staff at Hilliard Community Center, it's a special place, and I don't think you would find a community that addresses special needs as this community, this city does. But I would not, if that does not happen, I would suggest that you work very closely with the staff and figure out different ways of getting what you want, minus an FTE and possibly minus a van. But don't stop the fight. Work with those folks over there and see if you can't close that gap a little bit more, and maybe down the road we can do something.
I intend to stay with this. Thanks
Okay.
very much.
All right. And good luck with it.
Thank you.
Councilor Ortiz?
So, okay.
Back up.
Keep backing up.
Back up to the mic.
So, Mike and I spent quite a bit of time with you all talking about the ASA, the area
Ambulance service area.
ambulance service area. And at that point, it seemed to me that if we could keep our medics inside our city, which we don't, even though I understand that the road trips are usually where the money is, because those folks are usually in accidents, and that's more of a pay or fee mix. If we had the ASA redesign that we had talked about at our meetings, would that alleviate the problem, or do we still need 4 medic units in the city of Eugene?
I would venture to say that even if we were able to work out, so that what you're talking about is called Zone 3. If we were able to work out a situation where we actually gave up the calls in Zone 3, it would help with the situation. But the thing that I would like to just make sure that we understand is even with eliminating those calls from our call volume, we still have a problem. We still have a capacity problem. It's Scott will tell you, and I can't do anything but be really honest about this. When we have ambulances running 4,000 calls, they're overloaded, and so eliminating that will help with the issue. It will assist us, but it will not completely solve the problem.
And those numbers include the rural metro contract?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And how close are they to getting to the point where they could start doing higher level transports?
Well, that
is that a negotiation issue with the union?
I believe they're
Yes.
ready. I believe that they could step in a moment's notice and start doing that type of assisting.
Okay,
The question comes into, I believe, that the chief will have to deal with is, at what point will that revenue that they take away cause problem for us in our revenue that we're collecting to try and maintain the system? So I think that's also a very delicate situation.
It is.
You could
It is,
help
and
with that more.
Yeah, that would be a much larger discussion with how we would implement it. That's the we can't really we can try to estimate, and we could probably give you some reasonable estimates of what that would look like as far as the revenue that would go away with that. But it's
and how many buggies do they have down in Lane County right now at any given time?
Rural Metro?
Yeah.
They don't have any. They operate exclusively within the urban growth boundary with Eugene and some into Springfield.
So how many do they have?
Now?
Yes, within the city limits.
They have
doing the work.
3. They have 124 and 2 12-hour.
Well, I do appreciate what Mike's trying to do, and I do support the firefighters, but I think this is a more comprehensive conversation, and I've asked Chief Groves to get us back together for our task force. I've got a little bit of time left here on council, and I'd really like to try and get to the bottom of it, and kind of change the ASA and try and keep our paramedics that our taxpayers pay for within our city, and make sure that it's pretty viable. So I'm not really sure. I'll have to think about where I'm going to go. Thanks. Scott, did you have something to say?
Can I just address some of your concerns?
Sure, absolutely.
For those of you that attended the Fire Ops 101 training that the fire department offered, if you'll remember, a very fun time, I think, by all, but if you'll remember that component of the rescue, the extrication, the dragging of people, all of those type of things, that's the function that is planned to be removed from our organization. In essence, the backbone of the fire service is what's called the truck company. That's the component or piece of equipment that they plan to move into the swing capacity available. So, thank you.
Anything else, Councilor?
No,
Ortiz?
I'm done.
Councilor Farr.
Thank you. Well, I heard Councilor Clark say that he may not be making the motion tonight, so this may be a question for subsequent answer. First, an observation that fire trucks, when a fire truck responds, all of the personnel are EMT trained. So if there is for instance, a heart attack emergency, they can begin service as soon as they get there, whether or not an ambulance is present. The difference is that they're not able to transport. An ambulance is transport. So an ambulance arriving subsequently could follow up with the service with the transport. That's my understanding. Okay. And then my question kind of is around savings that we have realized by consolidation, which predominantly seem to be in administration at this point. When you asked the departments to make the 1.8% cut, Manager Ruiz, the savings that have been realized through administration, that was not taken into account with the cuts that were asked for, and the cut being that Chief Groves has suggested is the switch from a nine-person station to a 6-person station.
All of and I don't know if Chief, you can address that clear. Just a couple of thoughts. Over the last 3 years, as we've been going through our budget discussions, part of what has occurred as a part of the merger are savings, which have also been a part of previous year's discussions. So they're all accounted for either there or a part of this year's proposal, so.
That answers my question. So the restoration or the continuance of essentially a 9-person crew versus a 6-person crew. It's 9-person for an engine, which includes 3 captains, or 6 people for an ambulance, which does not include 3 captains. That's the difference right there. Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. Thank you.
Ramin.
Yes. Just to clarify, which station, I mean, you have a station 1, a station 2. Which one of the station is the?
Station 2.
2. And provided what is proposed, what is the effect on the minutes response? Is there any best case? You have 535.
Giving what would happen is that we would expect that there would be a slight increase in response times overall, because what the memo that came today talked about was response reliability, which is how often the apparatus is actually available in its first due territory. And so we may see we probably would see a slight increase in response time in that area.
But not a main alarming. I mean, it's hard to make a call.
Yes, sir. That would be very
But
difficult.
your best guess is a marginal.
I believe it would be marginal.
No.
So because I think we would tweak the system a little bit, make some changes that would actually help us a little bit by decreasing the first due territory, and there we would make some adjustments to try and mitigate that as much as we could.
Councilor Clark.
Yeah, I just had noticed that Councilor Zelenka and then just now Councilor Brown left the table, and I want to just confirm we need 9 people at the table for a quorum to conduct business,
That's correct.
and we have 11, so...
Yep. So
Okay,
we
I
can't
just
leave.
didn't want to have anybody else leaving before we get
Councilor
done.
Taylor is intending to leave before we adjourn, so. Anybody else intending to leave before we adjourn?
Oh, I'll leave.
Depends on what time.
If you want me to, I
Yeah,
can.
we can go.
If somebody doesn't like a motion, I'll just get up and
So I do want to remind you that, thank you. That John will not be able to be with us tomorrow, so I was trying to get his motion on
Very
the
least we
table
should deal with his.
this evening.
Absolutely.
So, but Councilor Taylor, you could leave and we would still have a quorum, so in case you were concerned about that. Was that what you wanted to address, Mike?
It was. It sounds like we'll be okay.
Okay. Councilor Pryor.
Thanks. It is always a challenge when you have to make a decision between 2 goods. I mean, what Scott's talking about is good. That is exactly what we ought to have, because I think everything you described is reasonable and thoughtful. What John is trying to do is also reasonable and thoughtful. He's trying to solve a problem and save money and address the budget. I would love to be able to have my cake and eat it too, but the only way I can do that, it's going to be $1 million cake. And where do we find $1 million for that cake? Now, or I can try to get, once again, Hobson's choice for $300,000 or leave things the way they are. I don't want to have to choose either one, but we may be forced into that kind of a decision unless, as Andrea says, we can maybe continue this conversation and not have to be forced to try to talk about it here, now, tonight, because as I've said before, I don't like being backed into a corner. I don't like to have to be rushed to make a decision because it's around this particular budget item. So the challenge for me is, what decision do I make now? But whatever decision I make now, it's only going to be a decision for now, because there still has to be the conversation about the larger issue. I won't let it go, just as Andrea won't let it go. We'll still have to figure out what we're going to do. So whichever way I vote tonight, that's only the start of what will have to be a conversation where we can get to having our cake and eating it too. That really is, for me, the best possible outcome. And I would work very hard to figure out how we can have our cake and eat it too, but we may not be able to do it tonight, but I intend for us to be able to get there either way.
All right. So I think it sounds like we've gone through our discussion in response to public comment, and I'd like to now give John Borowski an opportunity to propose propose, for real this time, his motion, and presumably there's a second, and we can discuss it.
I'll put this out there, and staff, if I need to reword this to make it reflective of what I actually want, I'm open to that. I move to recommend to the City Council that $200,000 of the FY12 marginal beginning working capital in the general fund, after the $900,000 transfer to the general capitals project fund, is transferred to the Public Works Enhanced Pothole Program for $100,000 and $100,000 to the Parks Department as a one-time allotment for operations and maintenance.
Second.
So I've pretty much spoken to this motion in previous things. In my view, it does a lot of things correct. In my view, it's an appropriate use for one-time money. It addresses ongoing needs that the city has that are not being addressed. It is only a recommendation, so council can, if they see when the supplemental budget comes up, if they see that there are more pressing needs for this money, they're not bound to it, but it is a recommendation from a body larger than themselves, so that hopefully it will have some weight, carry some weight. It will also hopefully carry some weight from the city manager and staff's perspective when they present the supplemental budget for consideration in December, if there is money available. So in that way, I think the motion is crafted in a fair and equitable way. Obviously, there's many, many needs that the city has. In my view, my job as a citizen member of the Budget Committee is to bring input as to what I think I would like to see the city of Eugene bring to the table as far as funding needs. And in my view, these are two areas that are worthy, and to do them in this fashion, I think, is prudent and correct. So I'll just put it out there and let the discussion fall where it may.
All right, well, I put myself in the queue. I will support this motion, and I would support it even if it was more prescriptive than a recommendation to City Council. I really appreciate John's perspective on creative use of our budgeting mechanisms and thinking ahead to maintaining our assets in the city. And, I think that's one of the strengths of this body, is that we bring different perspectives and emphasis to these topics. And so I appreciate this motion, and I will support it. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Sounds like folks are ready to vote. All right. John, did you want to say any last thing?
No.
Mike, did you want to? Councilor Clark? Nope. Okay. All right. So all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. You gonna let us know when you take our hands down?
You have 9, right?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8.
Kim, you got us? Oh, any opposed? We have 1. Any abstentions?
1.
And 1 abstention.
Can we abstain?
Do we, are we going back to this roll?
Everybody can abstain.
They can, we can't, they can't.
So city councilors are not allowed to abstain, but, what's that?
We can't.
I think they
They
operate
can't here.
I think that the Budget Committee operates under the same process components that the council does, but I may be wrong about that. That
What?
the yes or no vote
Anyone?
is required.
Process? Anyone?
The
We've had this debate before.
Budget Committee, if a Budget Committee member says they're not going to vote, the Budget Committee cannot force that person to vote.
Okay.
How about a council?
Seems reasonable.
At the Budget Committee member, it's protocols, and the council's protocol is everybody votes. The Budget Committee, my recollection of when we had this conversation maybe a year ago, I said you cannot force a Budget Committee member to vote. The protocols are different for the Budget Committee.
We have this,
While we're here, we're
we have
Budget
this every
Committee.
year, though.
While we're here, we're Budget
Committee,
Committee.
so if for some reason we want to abstain, we can, or do we as council members of the Budget Committee, have to vote.
You are a Budget Committee member when you're at this meeting.
You have a different hat on.
Just wanted clarification.
And a
Thank you.
different tie.
So we did have one abstention. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks. That was pretty painless.
Good job, John.
Good job.
So what I'd like to propose now is that we move on to Councilor Clark's intended motions, which obviously have not been fleshed out in this document. So we'll give you a couple minutes to speak to some of
Thank you very
the
much. I'll make
context.
the motions, and with a second, I'll go into discussion.
Oh, you've got motions ready.
Yes, I do. As a matter of
Excellent.
fact, the two of them, not the third one, though, because the fire one we probably want to have for tomorrow if we get better information.
So why don't you start with one, and we'll go through that.
I move to recommend to the council that upon receipt of the unanticipated additional silt monies from EWEB, that we spend $707,000 for 10 more jail beds than are currently budgeted in the FY12 to a total of 20, and to add the 10 beds for FY13. Those two numbers add up to $707,000.
Second.
Thank you. The reason for focusing on beds in this way and to increase to 20 for this year as a total, and to then have those additional 10 in the next year with these one-time monies, is to combat more of a specific problem that we're seeing an uptick in right now, and in advance of a continuing solution. And what I mean by that is we've had presentations at Police Commission and in the paper, and the department has begun to talk more about this, that we're seeing the potential for a problem with gang violence in our area. And as we move into the summer, there are other issues in other parts of the community that certainly this increase can address adequately. And I invite the chief to speak to this. But my guess is that that could be one of the best ways to hold folks and de-escalate situations that we may have at this time, and specifically around gang-related things if the chief
Can I
wants.
just ask for a clarification real quick?
Yes.
This would actually be $354,000 in FY12, and then there'd be 20 total bullet beds
I had
in 12.
350 for FY12 and 357 for FY13.
In FY13, the total number of beds would be 10.
Correct.
So it'd be
And-
20 in FY12 and 10 total in FY13.
Correct. And I would love to have it be 20, but I don't think we have the money to prudently do that. And with this, because I want to stay under the $1.3 million retail dollars that I know are more likely to come in and aren't as subject to the volatility of the wholesale dollars. But EWEB has projected the $2.2 million. And my guess is if we had EWEB folks at the table to talk about what November may bring, it may be a different number as we go farther out. So I want to keep under that $1.3 million number, and that's what this and the Buckley House motion I have is designed to do. So that's why I've only got 20 this year and 10 for the next year. These are one-time monies to combat this problem. Now, as we get to the end of this year, 9 new officers come on around the downtown core, and that relieves some of the pressure on some of the other areas. And with more officers on duty, you have a better ability to address this problem. And I would love to have, may I have a soup around here to finish?
Go ahead.
I would love to have both of them on an ongoing basis, but I'm trying to be prudent within the resources we have. Secondarily, one of the things we see a lot of in the Police Commission are the reports that the chief makes regularly about the upticks in crime in certain areas with the data-led policing. One of the things we saw was the fairly massive spike when the county shut the 84 beds that they did here a year and a half ago. Now, I'm under the impression that this year's county budget at least puts that sort of potential back on the table, if not this year, then certainly next. And I don't want us to get into that place again. Springfield built themselves a jail. That's their option. I would like us to be a little bit more ready in our community for what we may face if the county isn't able to do it as a backup piece, because I don't think that members of our community will distinguish between it's the county's responsibility and it's ours if we have a lot of other things in place but don't have a functional jail with a significant problem. So, I'd love to have the chief address the issue of how this might affect the gang presentations that we've had.
Well, there's no question that the next most important need that the department has of managing crime would be the addition of jail beds, and it would aid in our management of the street gang problem that we have, but not exclusively towards that.
So we've got a queue. John, I'll add you to it. Councilor Ortiz.
So, John, you'd asked us to not, look at this money. If this request came to you to add more jail beds, did you have any idea, or do you have any ideas of where else you would have gotten some dollars to say 5 more beds, not necessarily 10?
Yes.
Yes.
The one option for funding for FY12 is in the police department budget right now. We have this 9 new police personnel as part of the downtown public safety program. We won't spend all of that in FY12, and so there is dollars there, probably $350 that we could use for this particular purpose. So that would be one way to do that.
And then, do you foresee that we are going to be able to continue? I don't personally have any faith that we're not going to need these beds. It would be wonderful if we didn't. But do you have like a vision of how we're going to be perhaps using those, renting beds in Springfield or wherever you can get the best deal? I didn't see any on Groupon that buy one, get one free.
Right. Yeah. Maybe just talk a little bit about future funding of the whole downtown public safety initiative, and maybe how this does or doesn't sort of dovetail with that. What the council gave direction on a year plus ago was wanting to move the downtown public safety initiative forward and to have that funded. And I think the total funding of that was like $2.2 million a year, right? Something like that, 1.8, 2.2. Those our intent is to carry that out, which is what I think the council said they want to do. So the officers are funded, the downtown program is funded, jail beds are funded last year, this year. Our intent will be to continue to try to fund the jail beds and the program going forward. So that will be our intent as we move forward. Obviously, that's taking in context of the entire budget.
Yeah.
And so that would be our intent as we're moving forward anyhow, because that's council direction, and we believe that's an important direction to go with the public safety. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
So there's money right now within the budget for this FY12 that can be utilized for jail, for how many jail beds would you say? More than what you already have?
I think it'd be 8 to 10.
8 to 10.
Jail beds in the FY12 budget that would have been placed to do that.
Because I would like to honor your request. I feel like all the executives have worked really hard to deliver us a comprehensive budget. You gave them your charge of 1.8%, percent reduction, and I'd like to be respectful of the work that you all have done. And so if there is a way, I would love to support adding more beds for Pete. Excuse me, Chief Kearns, if you think that is the best place to put those dollars. I mean, if we said, okay, Pete, you've got $350K, what are you going to do with it? Would that be the best? Would that be where you would think that would be the most effective?
Well, from the money from this fiscal year that we have, that's how I would prefer to use that.
Okay. Okay, well then, then I'm cool with, I'm good with that. And so I would rather take money from his budget that he's going to have left over than to use that money. So, I'm
Is that a question?
No, I'm just telling you how we get to yes.
Councilor Farr.
Oh, thank you. Anybody with a grain of common sense understands the devastating effect that a revolving door has on both morale and function of the police department. And, more jail beds keeps more people who have demonstrated criminal activity off the streets and makes us all feel safer. My question, though, is regarding the beds themselves. Springfield beds are less expensive than Lane County beds, right? And that's because, one of the reasons is because it's healthy male adults that are housed in Springfield. Is this for specifically for Lane County beds, or?
Well, we would probably use it for the Springfield jail beds because they cost less, and most of the people that we arrest are men.
Okay, so it is making a more efficient, well, it's spending less money per jail bed.
That's right.
But narrowing down the
Yes, and we still have a contract with the county, so women that we arrest can...
And mental health issues.
Good, that's, thank you. That's it, thank you very much.
So I put myself in the queue. My question has to do with the FY13 part of this proposal. So is it correct to say you're proposing the base funding of the 10 beds for FY13 with this money?
Out of the SIL money.
Exactly. Yeah.
And because it's one time, I'm hoping that the county has a better solution by FY14, frankly.
Are you going to have some influence there?
But in theory, our base budget would most likely include those 10 beds. Is that correct? Or?
That's what we would endeavor to do. Now, the other thing, Glenn, you could probably address the issue of committing a future council in FY13, so I don't know if...
Well, I was going to ask to be recognized after add it to your list, but...
Go right ahead.
Related to the FY13, this budget committee and this council could choose to take the 54,000, put it into a reserve, but this budget committee and this council cannot mandate that the city manager include something in his proposed FY13 budget. And you can't appropriate money now for the FY13 budget. So the sense I have of your motion is really to take that 354,000, have staff put it into whatever the proper reserve is, and then it's really a request to the city manager that he include in his proposed FY13 budget the money for those jail beds.
Right.
But that's legally all you can do.
But the motion as it sits now with that understanding would be a legal motion, I mean, correct? Because it's a recommendation.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks for the clarification. John?
I guess a couple questions. One for Chief Kearns. Would these jail beds that we're buying, would those only be available to be used by the municipal court, or could a circuit court, if a crime was committed that raised itself to a circuit court level over a municipal court, could those be used for that? Or I'm not sure how that works.
They would not be used for that. They'd just be used for municipal court offenses.
Okay, so somebody could be matrixed out if it was a circuit court one. We couldn't say, we want this guy,
That's
unless it was Judge Allen sentencing them. So these beds will all be sentenced by our municipal court judge.
Yes.
Okay, that was the question that I had. And then the only other comment that I'd like to make is that if you move forward with the recommendation to use the unallocated FY11 funds from the unhired police positions, I would like to revise my guess on what the marginal beginning is. Reduce it by approximately $350,000.
So you were at 2.85, so that's
2.5.
There you
So
go.
I've got three more folks in the queue, including Mike, who's the maker of the motion. We're about 12 minutes from when we're supposed to adjourn. So, Mike, I don't know if you'd allow Ramin and Doug to go ahead of you and then give you the final word, or do you want us to be in the mix?
I don't need to sum up. I just wanted to say real quickly as a part of the discussion what
Okay,
Andrea said.
let me stick with the queue then. So, Ramin?
Hi, Chief, the motion that is proposed now, I mean, what is the ramification, to a daily life? Because some of them have been witness to more presentations, some of the members. Are you anticipating getting the word gangs and things? Is it something coming online that you anticipate that we need 10 beds, or we always needed additional 10 beds, and this year we will just get 10 beds?
The county probably needs about 1,000 beds.
Okay.
And we only have maybe 400 if you include those that Springfield has. So I have a whole list of statistics I could run
Okay.
through for you, but
Yeah.
suffice it to say that we are tremendously under-equipped with jail beds, so
Okay.
any addition will help us in some degree to manage crime.
But it's not an anticipation of what's coming. It's because my own personal feeling is that a couple of years ago we had a number of incidents happening. Last year, my own experience, not the statistics, things really calmed down. And I'm just one of the sample. So things would stay the same as this year if we get these beds, or
Yeah, it's hard to know
I know.
exactly what the effect would be with an additional 10 or 20 beds.
yeah.
But the problem now is that when we arrest people for low-level offenses, they spend a short amount of time in jail, they come out and they repeat the same offenses. And I know personally of a handful of street gang members that are committing violent crimes, going to jail, or only there briefly, and coming out and continuing to commit those crimes. So it would be, we'd be able to manage crime better if they could only commit one crime, stayed in jail until they're tried and sentenced. And what we also know is that when that entire process can be done, they're less likely to reoffend down the road. How much it could help in that way is really hard to tell with really the small numbers that we're talking about.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you. To specifically address what Andrea was saying, I thought about that. I know that there's a budget gap. There are additional monies because those officers that we budgeted in the last cycle don't come on until September or August or whenever it is. There's that extra amount of money. The question that I needed to ask the chief at the break was really around other pieces of equipment that I was planning on making motions about, like cameras in the downtown area or in other areas of town that can be a part of intelligence, information, and data-led policing. They are specific tools that the gang task force may need in this next year. And so I didn't make a motion about that because of the fact that those extra monies exist, and the chief has the capacity to use those in order to address that and get more specific about how to deal with the gang problem with the monies that he has already available. This is just the addition that I think will add the best amount of tools to the table for him in this year and for this summer before those new officers come online.
Doug.
Well,
Oh, I'm sorry. Chief, did you want to?
I'm not sure I understood if there was a question or a statement. Were you asking me if...
No, I was just explaining to Andrea why, and to the rest of the room,
Andrea,
why
do you
I
want to
didn't
be
make
back in
that
the queue?
motion.
Sure.
Doug.
That way.
well, I don't know how many gang members are watching this broadcast, but I think we've opened Pandora's box, and we better open up. I was in total support of John's wanting to save that money, but, you know, if we don't have places to put these folks, you know, what's to prevent them from ongoing criminal activity in gangs, and that's a scary thought. The question, when we buy beds, let's say we buy 10, 20 beds, we're locked into that amount. I mean, it's not like we pay as we fill them up. I know you probably could fill them up, but, I mean, you buy 10 beds, whether you fill those up or not, you've bought 10 beds.
I believe that's the arrangement with the county.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, Chief. We have a fluid contract, and so at times we may be over 10, we may be a little bit below 10, but we have a fluid contract that allows us a lot of flexibility. Some months we may average more than 10 beds per month, you know, over the course of the month, and sometimes it may be lower. And so what the chief is saying is that purchasing an additional 10 beds would give us greater capacity, and there's space available at the Springfield Jail to do that.
Oh, Springfield too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not a fixed contact.
Okay.
Price.
Good.
So it does.
It's a good
Yeah,
thing.
We pay by the day, by the jail bed, and it turns out that that's
So if you don't,
our capacity to.
if you don't fill 10, you don't pay for 10.
That's right.
Right.
That's all.
John?
What was I going to ask? Jail beds. Turn. Can you come back to me? I'm sorry.
Well, you were the last in the queue, actually, because Councilor Ortiz is waving and almost ready to call the question on this one.
I guess it was.
Take your time.
See, I got 2 minutes
Take a
to
few
think
minutes
about
here.
what it was.
Okay. Well, Sean.
Oh, I know what it was. So the way that the motion is written, move to recommend to the city council upon receipt of unanticipated silt revenues. Do we? When are we expecting to see when the check is cut, as the city manager would say?
We get e-web revenues once a month.
Okay.
So we should be getting another check maybe the end of this week would be our first indication of how well that's going, and then another one in, what month are we in? June, and then another one in July, which would, because of, government accounting and accruals
Yeah.
and stuff, would count towards our FY11 budget.
So you think if the increased revenue that we're expecting, would that hit before July 1st?
Some of it, but not all of it.
But enough to give you a pretty good idea that it's going to be 707,000? Or I'm just curious. Yes. Okay. That's what I was wondering. Because if it's later, that
we'd have a good idea.
Okay. That's what I just wanted to know the timeline. Thank you.
So I've got Councilor Ortiz and Shonda, and depending on how long you take, we might need a motion to extend.
So I'm going to support this motion, even though I don't think it's the wisest. I do want to send it to City Council. I do think it'll work. I would prefer that we use the unspent money of Chief's budget to address the jail bid issues, because that's a given. There's money in the bank sitting there. The silt money, if the officers truly need more support with whatever counterintelligence work they want to do in the downtown area, I'd be challenged on that, because there's work that needs to be done citywide. And I feel like we've put a lot of resources already downtown, and I know in my neighborhood where the gang members live, we need some extra support. So I would like to, so I'm going to support the motion, but know that when we get to the council, I'm going to have a different discussion.
Shonda.
I guess I'd like to talk about the part of this that you have recommended for FY13. If you did not have that as a recommendation, my understanding is it would go into the beginning working capital, and that we could have this discussion again next year.
That is correct.
And if the need is the same, or we can add, well,
It doesn't come in until December.
I see what you're saying, because you're recommending that it get into the proposed budget. Okay.
Exactly. So it's not it wouldn't be binding on the city manager to do that.
But it's a recommendation.
Exactly.
Quick comment.
In the back pocket.
Councilor Clark, you get the last word before we call
I
it.
absolutely agree with Councilor Ortiz. I absolutely agree, and if I misspoke, I apologize, that the gang problem is a citywide problem, and it is in other areas. It's not just in downtown. It is there, but that's not what I intended in my comments about other resources we already have going to combat that, not just in the downtown area, but in the community as a whole. It certainly was the reason I didn't move to have a smaller amount in this year and use those already existing revenues for the beds, was because I want to see them have the capacity to use that for gang-related activity in the community as a whole.
All right.
Hey.
So, calling the question.
We need to reword that, though.
My understanding from the city attorney is that the wording is
Do we need the
acceptable.
recommendation to council, or is
It
it?
says recommend.
Can I just can I clarify to make sure I understand? What this says to me is the first $707,000 of unanticipated silt gets put into this bucket for jail beds. I'll just reiterate my concern with this particular way of financing it. It absolutely can be done. My concern will be that other revenues will potentially fluctuate. So rather than backfilling for other revenues that go down, we'll be putting it into a different use, which we can do that. So that's part of my concern. Well, and I've expressed my other concerns around using the silt dollars, so.
Hear you.
Thank you, City Manager. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Is that everybody in favor?
Yes.
All right, motion passes with our slim quorum. And with that, we are adjourned until tomorrow at 5:30.
I'll do the Buckley.
Thank you, everyone.
First results, bond measure, 20,000.